Her name is Delia Hoyt. She's 31. For 3 years, she sat at the front desk of a 26-person freight brokerage in Memphis, and every single morning she answers the calls the salespeople send to voicemail. The angry ones. The ones nobody wants. Her badge says one word. Reception. She doesn't sigh into the phone. She writes down what the customer is actually saying on a yellow legal pad the software will never see. Then comes a Tuesday. 9:55. The glass conference room fills up for the weekly service call. 12 salespeople, and each one knows 1/12 of the story, all trying to rebuild last week's notes from memory. Delia stands in the doorway with her legal pad, and she says the quiet line. "Could I sit in on the Tuesday call and take the notes?" The room half laughs. Marcus Feld, the VP of sales, does not. He looks up, and instead of pointing her to a chair against the wall, he pulls out the seat right beside his own, at the head of the table. Then, he hands her the account nobody in that building would touch. If your real expertise has ever been invisible to your job title, this story is for you. Before we go on, subscribe, because this channel is built for exactly this kind of story. And do me one small favor. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The phone at the front desk of Wolf River Logistics Group rang for the first time at 7:40. Delia already had her coffee. She always had her coffee by 7:30, and she always drank it at the desk, because if she carried it back to the break room, the phone sat unmanned. And unmanned phones at a freight brokerage meant a driver stuck at a gate somewhere with nobody picking up. She answered on the second ring. She always let it ring twice. 1 ring felt frantic. 3 felt ignored. 2 was the number that told a person on the other end that somebody was here, and that somebody wasn't in a hurry to hang up. Wolf River Logistics. This is Delia. It was a receiver in Olive Branch, angry about a load that had shown up warm. Delia listened. She didn't interrupt. She wrote on the yellow pad. Not what he demanded, what he needed. There's a difference, and she'd learned it the hard way. A caller tells you what they want in the first 10 seconds. They tell you what they actually need somewhere around minute 4, when they finally stop performing the anger and start describing the problem. She wrote it down. Warm load. Temp came in at 41, should have been 34. Driver said the reefer cycled fine. Receiver wants a credit, but really wants to know it won't happen again on Thursday's delivery. That last part. That was the part the system would never hold. The credit went into the claim software. The Thursday worry went nowhere, except onto her pad. She'd started keeping the pad in her second year. It wasn't a decision so much as a slow loss of faith. She'd type a careful note into the customer record, 3 or 4 sentences, everything the caller had told her. Then a week later, she'd watch a salesperson open that same record, skim it, and repeat back to the customer the exact wrong version of events. Because the record held what somebody had decided to type. It did not hold what the customer had actually said. Those were 2 different things. She'd figured that out at the front desk of a small brokerage in Memphis, and she'd never once heard anyone else in the building say it out loud. So the pad. Yellow legal, the cheap kind. A fresh one every few weeks. She dated the top of each page. She wrote the caller's real problem in her small square hand, and she kept them. All of them. A stack of them, in the bottom drawer of the front desk, going back 3 years. Nobody knew about the stack. Nobody had asked. Here's the thing about Delia that nobody in that building had bothered to learn. Before the front desk, she wasn't a receptionist. She was a dispatcher. 4 years of it at a temperature-controlled carrier called Delta Reefer Lines. 40 trucks, all reefer, all produce and pharma and anything that died if it got warm. She ran the night board. And when a temp alarm went off at 2 in the morning on a truck outside Texarkana, she was the voice the driver heard. She'd talked more than one exhausted man through resetting a reefer unit in the dark, on the shoulder of I-40, engine idling, product on the line, both of them knowing that if the box climbed past a certain number, The whole load was garbage, and somebody's month was ruined. Delta folded in 2021. The whole company, gone, 40 trucks sold at auction. Delia needed work, and the brokerage needed a front desk. And that was that. She never made a thing of the dispatch years. When it came up at all, it came up like this. Around 10 one morning, a new salesman named Kyle was standing at her desk waiting for a badge. And he made small talk about a reefer claim he was fighting. He said something about how he didn't really understand how the units worked. Delia, not looking up from the pad, said the unit's probably fine. 9 times out of 10 it's the pre-cool. They load a warm box and blame the machine. Kyle blinked at her. She added, like it was nothing, I used to do dispatch. Before, talked a guy through a temp alarm at 2 in the morning once, out past Texarkana. Saved the load. Then the phone rang, and she answered it on the second ring, and the conversation was over. Kyle told 2 people. The 2 people forgot. That was the whole arc of Delia Hoyt's reputation inside Wolf River Logistics. Competent, pleasant, invisible. The first ring on every complaint the company ever received, and a name badge that said reception. She was fine with it. Mostly, she told herself she was fine with it, which is a slightly different thing. Now here's the problem she watched play out every single week from her chair by the door. The brokerage held a service call every Tuesday morning. 12 salespeople in the glass room, going account by account through the previous week's fires. Who was mad? Who was owed a credit? Which shipper was threatening to pull freight? In theory, it kept everyone aligned. In practice, it was 12 people reconstructing a week from memory, 2 days after most of the memory had already gone stale. Because Tuesday's call covered the previous week, and the previous week's problems had mostly landed on the phone, Delia's phone. She'd taken the calls, live, as they happened, Wednesday through Monday. She'd heard the receiver in Olive Branch, and the shipper in Hernando, and the dock foreman who couldn't get a truck unloaded. She'd written all of it on the pad, in real time, in the actual words the actual customers used. And then on Tuesday, 12 people who had not taken those calls sat in a glass room and tried to remember what had happened. The gap was expensive. She could see it. A deal would slip because a salesperson misremembered which side of a claim the customer stood on. A promise made on Thursday would get contradicted on the following Tuesday because nobody had a clean record of the Thursday promise. Marcus Feld, the VP, spent his nights fixing it. She knew that because she saw the timestamps. He rewrote everyone's notes at 9, 10 at night, cleaning up the record from memory and phone tag, trying to build one true version of a week out of 12 partial ones. He was drowning in it. She could see that too. So she did what she'd been trained to do at a dispatch board. She looked at a broken process and she drafted a fix. She didn't draft a favor. That was important to her. And she'd think about the distinction a lot later. She didn't write herself a little note asking to be included, please, if it wasn't too much trouble. She wrote an offer. She, Delia, was already taking every one of these calls live. She already had the real notes. On the pad. Written the moment the customer said the thing. If she simply sat in the Tuesday call and read from what she already had, the 12-person reconstruction problem went away. The week would arrive at the meeting already written down. Correctly, in the customer's own words. It solved his Thursday problem. It solved everyone's Thursday problem. It cost the company nothing but a chair. She practiced the sentence at her desk for 2 days before she said it. Isn't that something? A grown woman, 4 years of night dispatch behind her, practicing 6 words. But the front desk teaches you exactly how small your voice is in a building. And she knew that if she got the wording wrong, it would land as reception overstepping. And the answer would be a polite no. And the door would close a little tighter. So she got the wording right. Not can I please. Not would it be okay. An offer. From the doorway, so she wasn't taking a chair before it was given. So the posture itself said, I am here to help, not I am here to be included. The next Tuesday, 9:55, she stood in the doorway of the glass room with the current pad in her hand, and the last 3 years of them still in the drawer behind her. Her heart was going hard enough that she could feel it in her neck. She waited for the room to settle. 12 of them, coffee and laptops. Brandon Teal already talking. Already running the room the way the top salesman always runs a room. And Delia said it. Clear, even not a plea. Could I sit in on the Tuesday call and take the notes? For a second, nobody understood the sentence. Then Brandon smiled the smile of a man who has never once had to answer his own phone. And he said it to the room more than to her. Reception's got the minutes now? A couple of the younger reps laughed. Not cruelly, just the easy laugh of people agreeing with the loudest guy so the moment can move on. Delia felt it land somewhere under her sternum, the old familiar place. She kept her face still. She'd kept her face still through worse than a laugh. She'd kept it still through a driver crying on the phone at 3 a.m. because he thought he'd lost a $40,000 load, and it was on him. She did not step into the room. She held the doorway. And Marcus Feld looked up. He'd been quiet, the way he usually was, until the call actually started. A legal pad of his own in front of him, though his was white and mostly blank. He looked at Delia in the doorway. He looked at the pad in her hand, the yellow one, the corner soft from use, and something moved behind his eyes that nobody else in the room caught, because nobody else in the room had spent 10 years rewriting other people's notes at 9 at night, and so nobody else in the room understood what he was looking at. He was looking at the one thing he'd been trying to build every single night, and it was already built, and it had been sitting 40 feet away at the front desk the whole time. He didn't say she could take the minutes. He didn't send her to the chair by the wall. He reached over and pulled out the seat beside his own. At the head of the table. "Sit up here," he said, "where I can hear you." The room went a specific kind of quiet. Not shocked, exactly, just recalibrating. A receptionist did not sit at the head of the table between the VP and the top salesman. That was not a thing that happened. But the VP had done it, calmly, like it was the most natural request in the world, and so nobody had a script for objecting. Delia crossed the room. She sat down in the chair Marcus Feld had pulled out. She set the yellow pad on the glass in front of her. And when the call started and the reps began doing their usual thing, reconstructing last Wednesday's mess from 3 conflicting memories, she waited for the account to come up. Then she read what she'd written. The day. The caller. The real problem. What they wanted versus what they needed. Clean. Specific. In the customer's own words. The room stopped reconstructing. You could feel it. For the first time in anyone's memory, the Tuesday call had a spine. She wasn't guessing. She'd been on the phone. Twice she corrected a salesperson gently. Not to embarrass him, just the record. That's not quite it. He didn't ask for a credit. He asked whether Thursday's load would be handled by the same driver. Those aren't the same call. And the salesperson would open his mouth to argue, and then he'd remember that she was the one who'd actually answered the phone, and he'd close it again. Brandon Teal watched all of this with a smile that got tighter by the minute. The call ran its length. Account after account, and each time it was cleaner with her in the chair. At the end of it, Marcus straightened up, and he did the second thing. The thing that turned a quiet promotion into a public dare. One more, he said. Rio Verde. Something in the room changed temperature. Delia would learn what it meant in about 4 seconds. Rio Verde produce, Marcus said, and he looked down the table. And then he looked at Delia. 11 open claims. Somewhere around $418,000 in open and threatened money. A receiving window at Green Line Distribution, 6 to 8 in the morning, that we miss about 40% of the time. 3 reps in 2 years have quit rather than keep carrying it. He let that sit. It's nobody's account right now, because nobody will take it. He turned the pad, his blank white one, a quarter turned toward Delia. Small gesture. Enormous, take it, he said. It's yours. For one full second, there was no sound in the glass room but the air handler. Then Brandon laughed. Not the easy laugh from before. A sharper one. Delighted, because he could already see how this went. Sure, Brandon said. Give her Rio Verde. Let's see. And that, right there, was the moment the mismatch went public and got judged. Not whispered about. Judged, out loud by the top salesman, in front of the whole sales floor. Give the receptionist the account that had already beaten 3 real salespeople. Let's see. There was a whole prediction inside those 2 words, and everyone in the room heard it. This would be the thing that put her back in her place. This would be the demonstration. The receptionist with her yellow pad, sunk by the account that sank professionals. Delia felt every eye. She kept her face still. 3 years of practice. Her hands did not shake on the glass. And Marcus, quiet, not to the room, almost only to her, said the strangest thing. It didn't make sense yet. It would make complete, devastating sense later, but in that moment, it just hung there. Small and flat. It's the only one I can give you, he said without anyone in this room objecting. Brandon heard it as a joke about how nobody wanted the account. He grinned wider. But Delia heard the shape of it, even if she couldn't read it yet, and she filed it away on the pad in her head, the one that never ran out of pages. Something in the sentence didn't match the smile Brandon was wearing. Something in it was almost gentle. The meeting broke. People filed out talking about it, and by lunch the whole floor knew. The VP had put reception in the head chair and handed her the poison account, and Brandon Teal had said, let's see, and now everybody was going to see. Delia went back to the front desk. She drank the last of her cold coffee. The phone rang and she answered it on the second ring, because the world does not stop for a promotion nobody's sure was a promotion. But when the line went quiet, she opened the bottom drawer of the desk, and she looked at 3 years of yellow legal pads stacked in the dark, and she did not feel afraid. She felt, for the first time in a long time, like somebody had handed her a problem that matched what she actually knew. Now, she did not panic. That's the first thing to understand about what came next. A person who has talked a driver through a dying reefer at 2 in the morning does not panic at 11 claims and a bad receiving window. She organizes. She pulled the Rio Verde file that afternoon. All of it. Every claim, every note, every email thread the 3 departed reps had left behind. And she read it the way she read a caller. Not for what it said it was, for what it actually was. Here's what the file said. Rio Verde Produce was a nightmare shipper. Difficult, demanding. The claims file was thick, with the shipper calling, escalating, threatening, and the reps scrambling to answer. Every note framed it the same way, a relationship problem with a hard customer. That was Brandon's whole doctrine, actually. The thing he said about every troubled account. It's a relationship problem at the shipper. Manage the relationship, calm the shipper down, and the claims soften. 3 reps had tried exactly that. 3 reps had quit. Delia read the file, and then she did the thing nobody else in the building could have done. She got up, and she opened the bottom drawer, and she pulled her own 3 years of pads, and she read the Rio Verde loads against her own front desk log. The company's version against the version she'd taken live off the phone as it happened. And she found the tell. It took her most of an evening, alone at the front desk after the floor emptied out, the pads spread across the glass. But once she saw it, she could not unsee it, and she could not understand how a whole building had missed it for 2 years. The shipper called twice about every bad load. Rio Verde, the sender, the one everyone thought was the problem, called Delia's desk 2 times on every claim. Once to report it, once to follow up. Loud, yes. Demanding, yes, but present. Engaged, calling. The receiver never called at all. Green line distribution. The dock where these loads were supposed to arrive between 6 and 8 in the morning. The place that was, according to the file, 40% of the time, not getting its trucks in the window. In 3 years of her own logs, across 11 claims and dozens of loads, Delia could not find a single call from Greenline's receiving dock. Not one. The company had a thick file on a two-sided problem, and every page of it was the loud side. The shipper. Nobody, not one of the 3 reps who quit, had ever once picked up the phone and called the other end of the lane. The company had spent 2 years managing the loud half of a two-sided problem. And losing. Delia sat there with the pads spread in front of her and felt the old dispatch clarity settle over her. The thing that used to arrive at 2 in the morning when a load was on the line and the answer was somewhere in the noise if you just stopped listening to the panic and started listening to the pattern. This wasn't a relationship problem at the shipper. It had never been a relationship problem. The shipper was fine. The shipper was calling twice a claim because the shipper was desperate to be heard. This was something at the dock. Something at the 6 to 8 window. Something on the receiving end that no one had ever asked about. Because everyone had been too busy being yelled at by the sender to wonder why the receiver was so completely, suspiciously silent. She wrote one line at the top of a fresh yellow page. She dated it. And the line was this: "Nobody ever called Greenline." The weeks after that had a rhythm she'd remember for the rest of her life. The second chair, the one at the head of the table beside Marcus, became hers. Not officially. Nobody announced it. But the next Tuesday she walked in, and it was empty and waiting. And the Tuesday after that too, and by the third week a salesman who tried to sit in it stood back up when he saw her coming, without either of them saying a word. It was hers. The room had decided, the way rooms decide things, silently and all at once. Marcus noticed things about her. She noticed him noticing. He noticed that she carried her coffee back to the front desk instead of drinking it in the break room, and one Tuesday after the call he asked her why, and she told him. Phones can't sit unmanned. A driver at a gate needs a voice on the second ring. He looked at her for a second too long when she said second ring, like he was adding something up, and then he just nodded and let it go. But she caught it. The addition. The 9 o'clock edits changed too. She still had the Rio Verde file to rebuild, and he still had his nightly habit of cleaning up the shared notes, and so more nights than not they were both in the same shared document at 9. 10 at night, from their separate screens, hers at the front desk, his in his office 40 feet away. It started as track changes, little edits crossing in the file. Then a comment in the margin from him. Dry, funny. Then a comment back from her. And one night the comment stopped being about the file at all. And it was just 2 people typing to each other in the margins of a spreadsheet at 10 at night, both of them tired, both of them still there, neither of them leaving. She never named it. He never named it. But the centimeter closed, the way a centimeter does, unmeasurably, until one day the distance is just gone, and you can't remember which night it went. The first real summer storm rolled in over Memphis on a Thursday. She watched it come across the lot through the front glass, the sky going that bruised green-gray that means the reefer trucks better be sealed. Somebody's load was going to sit in that. She thought about drivers in it. She always thought about the drivers. And through all of it, the thing at Greenline sat in the back of her mind, refusing to close, because she still hadn't done the one thing the file told her to do. She'd found the tell. Nobody ever called Greenline. She'd read the pattern. But reading a pattern isn't fixing it. She was still, technically, taking notes on the account. She hadn't yet owned it. Every rep for 2 years had called the shipper. Rio Verde, the loud, calling, present shipper. Because that's who called them, so that's who they called back, around and around for 2 years, while 3 careers quietly ended. Not one person in the history of the account had ever picked up the phone and called Greenline Distribution's receiving dock and asked the dock manager a single question. Delia had checked. She'd checked twice, the way the shipper always did. There was no record of the call because the call had never happened. So one Tuesday afternoon after the call, with the storm cleared and the lot steaming, and the second chair still warm behind her, Delia sat down at the front desk. she pulled the green line file. She found the direct line to the receiving dock, a number that appeared nowhere in any rep's notes, a number she'd had to dig for. She wrote the dock manager's name on a fresh yellow page and dated the top. Then she put her hand on the phone. This was the thing. She knew it even as she did it. This was the moment she stopped taking notes on other people's accounts and started owning one. Not a favor. Not minutes. A call no one in the building had ever placed, to the one person no one in the building had ever thought to ask. She let herself feel the weight of it for exactly one breath. 4 years of night dispatch. 3 years of a yellow pad in a dark drawer. A room full of people waiting to see her sink. Brandon's 2 words. Let's see. Delia Hoyt picked up the phone, and she dialed the number nobody had ever called. The line rang once, then twice. On the 3rd ring, a man picked up, and he did not sound happy to be doing it. Receiving, this is Ray. Delia had her pen already moving. She said his name back to him. She said hers. She said the name of the account, and she waited for the sigh. Because there is always a sigh when you say the name of an account like Rio Verde to the person who lives at the other end of it. The sigh came, right on time. Let me guess, Ray said. Rio Verde's calling to yell about their claims again. No, Delia said. Rio Verde isn't on this call. I'm not calling about them. I'm calling about you. There was a pause on the line. A different kind of pause. The kind you get when a person who is used to being blamed realizes, for 1 second, that maybe this time they aren't. About me, Ray said. About your dock, Delia said. About what actually happens on your dock between 6 and 8 in the morning. Because in 3 years, nobody at my company has ever asked you. And I read the file twice to be sure. She heard him shift the phone. She heard a chair. And then Ray told her. He told her the 6 to 8 receiving window was a fiction. It looked good on a rate sheet. It meant nothing on the floor. He had 2 men on at that hour. 2, the lumpers didn't clock in until 9. So when a Rio Verde reefer rolled up at 6:40 with a full temp-controlled load, it sat. It sat on the dock, engine running, product breathing, while 2 men tried to break a trailer that needed 6. By the time anyone opened the doors and checked a pulp temp, the numbers had drifted. Not because the produce was bad, because it had sat 4 hours past its appointment on a hot dock in a truck that couldn't hold temp forever. 40% of the time, he said. 40% of the time, we blow that window. And every time we do, Rio Verde files a claim. And they file it against the carrier and the broker, and nobody ever calls me. Delia wrote it all down. Every word. On the yellow page with his name at the top. Then she asked him the question that no one in the building had ever thought to ask, because no one in the building had ever gotten this far. What time, she said, does your dock actually work? Mid-morning, Ray said, like it was obvious, because to him it was. 10:30. I've got a full crew by then. I could turn a reefer in 40 minutes and close the paperwork clean. But nobody schedules me for 10. They schedule me for 6, because that's what the appointment says, and then everybody's mad at me by 8. Delia set down her pen. She had it. The whole thing. 3 careers, 2 years, $418,000 in open and threatened claims. And it was a schedule. It was a man with 2 hands at 6 in the morning who needed to be a man with 6 hands at 10. That was all it had ever been. Ray, she said, what if I move them off 6? Silence. You can do that? I can try, she said. Give me 2 days. She hung up. She looked at the yellow page. She did not tell anyone. Not yet. Because here is the thing about knowing something first. You have to be sure before you say it out loud in a building that has already watched 3 people be wrong. So Delia went quiet, and she went to work. And she did it the way she used to do it at 2 in the morning, at a desk that no longer existed. Delta Reefer Lines, 4 years of it. 40 trucks. A carrier that folded in 2021 and took her title with it, but not what was in her head. She still knew how a reefer held temp. She still knew how a claim got built, board by board, from a receiving report and a pulp reading and a printout nobody could ever find when they needed it. She pulled the appointment schedule. She called Vince Alonso at Rio Verde, the ops man everyone had spent 2 years shouting at. "You're the 4th person to have this account," Vince said, flat, when she said her name. "I've stopped learning names. I'm not calling to blame you," Delia said. "That's new. I know what's wrong," she said. "It's not your product. It's not your drivers. It's the appointment. Greenline can't work you at 6. They can work you beautifully at 10. Nobody ever moved you off 6 because nobody ever called the doc. I called the doc." For a long moment, Vince Alonso said nothing at all. Then he said, "Quiet, say that again." She said it again. 2 days later, the appointments moved. Rio Verde's reefers stopped rolling up to a dead dock at 6:40. They started rolling up at 10, into a full crew, and Ray turned them in 40 minutes, and the pulp temps held, because the product wasn't sitting anymore. And the claims stopped. Not all at once, but they stopped starting. The bleeding stopped that week. And then the pressure came anyway, the way it does, right when you think you've bought yourself room. There was one load, a big one. A claim already 90 days into its clock, a PACA deadline coming down like a gate, and if it closed against them, it took a piece of that $418,000 with it. To beat it, they needed proof the temp had held in transit. They needed the reefer download. And nobody could find it. The reps went to the shipper. Of course they did. That was the reflex. 2 years of reflex. They called Rio Verde and asked Rio Verde for a printout Rio Verde had never had, because the download doesn't live at the shipper. It lives on a driver's tablet. Delia knew which driver. She knew because she'd logged the load when it dispatched, on a yellow page, months back, a name and a truck number nobody else had bothered to keep. She called him direct. It was the afternoon. She talked to him the way she'd talk to drivers at 2 in the morning about temp alarms, easy and specific, and she walked him through pulling the download off the tablet and sending it. It came through before the end of the day. The temp had held the whole run. The claim died on the vine. The gate didn't fall. She had done in one afternoon what the building had failed to do in 90 days. And she had done it because she was the only person who knew which tablet to ask. That is the part worth sitting with. That is the whole story, really, in one afternoon. Because a CRM records what a salesperson decides to type. That's all it can ever do. It's a room full of choices about what was worth writing down. 12 salespeople, each one keeping 1/12 of the truth. Each one typing the version that made the week look survivable. The front desk records something else. The front desk records what the customer actually said. Every angry call, on the second ring, before it ever became a note somebody chose to write. Delia had been sitting on top of the real record for 3 years. Not the record of what the company decided. The record of what the world actually did. Those two things had never once been the same document. Not in the whole history of the company. And she was the only person alive who had read both. That was what Marcus Feld had handed her. She understood it now. She'd been turning his line over in her head for weeks. "It's the only one I can give you without anyone in this room objecting." She'd thought it was a warning. It wasn't. It was the answer. He hadn't discovered some hidden talent and rewarded it. He'd done something quieter and smarter than that. He'd given her the account that had already beaten 3 people. The one that couldn't get worse. Because an account that can't get worse is the only account you can hand to a receptionist without 12 salespeople objecting. And an account nobody else wanted was the only account she'd ever be allowed to win. He didn't promote her. He gave her the account that had already beaten 3 people. And it was the first thing anyone ever gave her that she actually knew how to hold. She wasn't waiting to be found. She'd been the single continuous listener, in a building where everyone else heard 1/12. He just gave her a reason to say it out loud. The rest of it happened the way the good parts of a life happen. Slow, and then all at once. Rio Verde stopped bleeding, and then it started to grow. Vince Alonso, who had stopped learning names, learned hers. He started routing more freight, loads he'd been giving to other brokers. Out of spite, out of exhaustion, he started giving back. The account climbed. It climbed past the middle of the board. By month 5, it was pushing toward the second largest book in the office, and it had a receptionist's name on it. The second chair at the head table was hers now, every Tuesday. Nobody moved it back. And the small things had gathered around the two of them the way small things do. Marcus noticed she took her coffee back to the front desk, never the break room. Because if she stood around the break room, the phones went unmanned, and an unmanned phone was a complaint nobody caught on the second ring. He noticed that about her before he noticed anything else. He started leaving her edits in the shared file at 9 at night, and the edits turned into margins. And the margins turned into the first real conversation either of them had had with another adult in a long time. Then came the storm. The first big summer storm over the lot, the kind Memphis throws down in July without warning. The sky going green and the rain coming sideways across the asphalt. It was after 7. Nearly everyone was gone. Delia stood under the overhang with her legal pad held against her chest, and Marcus came out with one umbrella, and there was that half second where a person decides. He held it out. They walked to the lot together, slow, under the one umbrella, the rain loud on it, neither of them in any particular hurry to reach the cars. And there was a line, right there, that neither of them said. It sat in the air the whole walk. He didn't say it. She didn't say it. That was the closest it got, and for a while that was enough. And it was clean. But an office is a room with glass walls. And a room with glass walls notices. By month 5, they'd been noticed. A look held 1 second too long across the glass. That's all it takes. Brandon Teal noticed. Brandon, whose book Rio Verde was now crowding. Brandon, who had built his whole career on the idea that every bad account was a relationship problem at the shipper. Brandon, who had never, not once, called a receiver. And Brandon did the thing a man like that does when the ground moves under his ranking. He didn't argue the numbers. He couldn't. So he went upstairs to Rennick, the owner, and he reframed the whole thing. He called it what he needed it to be. He said the rescued account had been handed to the VP's girlfriend. He took the cleanest win the office had seen in years, and he wrapped it in the word favoritism and set it on Rennick's desk. And because the relationship was, by then, real and known, the accusation had just enough truth in its edges to cut. That was the low point. That was the all is lost. Because a win credited to nepotism isn't a win. It's a story about a woman who slept her way to a book, and Delia had spent 3 years being invisible. She would not spend the 4th being that. So she did the competent thing. The thing this story refuses to treat as small. She went to HR herself. First, before anyone could use it against her, she sat down across from Sandra Pace, the HR generalist, careful and fair, and Delia laid it out plainly. The relationship, the reporting line, all of it, in her own words, on the record, in her own hand, before anyone else could put it in theirs. I want to move off Marcus's reporting line, Delia said. Today, and if it comes to it, I'll move off the account too. Sandra looked at her for a long moment. You're bringing this to me yourself. Before somebody else does, Delia said. I'd rather own it than be caught with it. Sandra wrote something down. Not on a yellow pad. But Delia noticed she wrote it. And she noticed it was accurate. And so Delia left the head table, with dignity, on her own terms, before she could be pushed. She went back to the front desk, legal pad in her lap, and the Tuesday chair sat empty again, and the account she'd built kept performing without her sitting at the table. because the fix she'd made was structural now and didn't need her body in the room. That was the lowest point. The win still working. The author back at the front desk. The whole building waiting to see whether the number or the rumor would win. Marcus was told to keep it clean. And he had a choice to make, the kind that cost something either way. Protecting her could mean stepping back, going quiet, letting the thing cool until the office forgot. Or it could mean standing up in front of the same room that had judged the mismatch and saying the true thing out loud, at the risk of proving Brandon right about the closeness while proving him wrong about everything else. He chose the room. It was a Tuesday, 9:55. The glass conference room filled the way it always did, except this time, Rennick sat at the head, and the whole office was in it, and there was a screen. Marcus didn't make a speech. He didn't say a single romantic word. He put the data up. Rio Verde produce, he said. 11 open claims when we handed it over. $418,000 open and threatened. 3 reps quit on this account in 2 years. He let that sit. The 3 empty desks those reps had left still stood out on the floor, if you knew where to look. Here's where it is now. He clicked. The number changed. 0 open claims. The $418,000 cleared, and the account is now the second largest book in this office. The room was very quiet. I want to tell you how, Marcus said. Because how is the whole point. He walked them through it. The 6 to 8 receiving window. The dock that couldn't work at 6 and worked beautifully at 10. The 40% miss rate that everyone had spent 2 years blaming on the product and the shipper and the drivers. For 2 years, he said, every person who touched this account called the shipper. Because the shipper called us. It was a relationship problem at the shipper. That's what we told ourselves. He didn't look at Brandon. He didn't have to. The one person who fixed it treated it like a dock schedule problem. Because she's the one person in this building who answers every complaint before it becomes a note somebody chose to type. She called the receiver. Nobody had ever called the receiver. Not once in the history of the account. He turned from the screen to the room. And I know what's being said in the hallway, he said. So I'll take it off the table right now, with a fact instead of an argument. As of this morning, Delia reports to Rennick. Not to me. I've restructured the line. There is no reporting relationship between us anymore, and there won't be. If anyone wants to call this a favor, the favor is now impossible. What's left on that screen is just the work. You could have heard a pen drop. And a pen did, somewhere near the back. Brandon Teal had nothing on the screen. That was the thing. When it came around the table, when Rennick's eyes moved from face to face, Brandon had his framing and his ranking and 2 years of relationship theory and not one receiving report to stand on, because he had never in his life called a doc. His doctrine was up on the wall now, named, and it was standing over 3 empty desks. Rennick recalculated in real time. You could watch it happen on his face. He was not a slow man. He turned to Delia, who was sitting, not at the head table this time, but in a chair by the wall legal pad in her lap, because she had put herself there. How many other accounts, Rennick said slowly, have you been quietly fixing from that front desk? Delia didn't answer right away. She glanced down at the pad. 3 years of them. A few, she said. Sandra Pace spoke up then, once. Clean, for the record. She came to me first. Before any of this. She raised it herself and asked to move off the line. Rennick nodded slowly. He looked at the screen. He looked at the empty desks. He looked at Brandon, who was studying the table. And he looked at the woman by the wall with the yellow pad. And everyone in that glass room watched a man do arithmetic he should have done years ago. The room cleared, eventually, the way rooms do. In 2s and 3s, quieter than they came in. Marcus found her off to the side. After, he had the yellow legal pad in his hand. She'd left it on the table. He held it out to her. "I didn't give you the account," he said. "You were the only one who could take it." She took the pad back from him. She looked at it, then at him. Her answer was dry, and it was final, and it was hers. "You gave me the chair," she said. "I gave myself the account." He didn't argue. He couldn't have, and he didn't want to. He reached over and pulled out the head table chair, the one beside where his had been. He pulled it out the way he had that first Tuesday, months ago, in front of the whole room. But it was different now. It wasn't a favor this time. It wasn't a disproportion. It was a chair that belonged to a woman who reported to the owner and ran the second largest book in the building. He pulled it out because it was hers now by structure, not by grace. She sat down in it. And that was the whole declaration. Hands instead of speeches, and it was enough, and it was clean. 2 years went by. It was a Tuesday, 9:55. The same glass room, the light coming across the same table. Delia Hoyt ran the produce and reefer book now. Her own line of accounts. She reported to Rennick, and she'd reported to Rennick for 2 years. And nobody said the word favoritism anymore, because there was nothing left to hang it on. She and Marcus were public, and unremarkable, and clean, the way a thing becomes when it's simply true and nobody's fighting it. Her chair sat at the head table where it belonged, not borrowed, not pulled out for her, just hers. At 7:40 the phones had been busy. By 7:30 she'd already caught 2 complaints on the second ring, the way she still did some mornings, because she never fully left the desk in her head. Old habits from a carrier that folded in 2021. Old habits from 2 in the morning, and a temp alarm, and a driver who needed someone calm on the line. And at 9:55, as the room filled, a voice came from the doorway. Delia looked up. A new hire stood there, front desk. Young, a yellow legal pad held against her chest, the same way Delia had held hers, 3 years and then 5 years ago now, in a doorway just like it, in a room just like this. "Could I sit in?" the new hire said, "and take the notes?" The room did the thing rooms do. A couple of half smiles. Somebody almost said something. Delia didn't laugh. She reached over, and she pulled out the chair beside her own, and she nodded at it. The girl came in and sat. She set the yellow pad on the table and clicked her pen. "Here's the difference, if you want it, and it's the only lesson in the whole thing. The receptionist who asks for a promotion is asking to be moved somewhere else. She's asking to be lifted out of the desk and set down someplace better. But the receptionist who asks for a chair isn't asking to be moved. She's asking to be handed the thing that can't get worse. And the thing that can't get worse is the only thing you can win without anyone in the room objecting." Delia slid the girl's pad an inch to center it in front of her. She'd done that with her own once. She watched the new hire write the date at the top of the page, the way she'd taught the desk to do it, the way she still did it every morning. The pad had traveled the whole distance, doorway to head table to the hand of the next one in the doorway. Same paper, same pen, same 6 words. "Start with whoever called twice," Delia said quietly to the girl. "Not whoever called loudest, whoever called twice about the same load. That's where the real problem's hiding." The girl wrote it down. The meeting came to order. And out beyond the glass, on the second ring, a phone was already ringing at the front desk, and someone new was there to answer it. And somewhere a dock manager was about to be asked, for the first time, what actually happened on his floor. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. 2 years looks like this. It looks like the parking lot at 7:40 in the morning, Delia's car already in the same spot she's taken since, before anyone thought to assign her one. It looks like the yellow pad on the conference table, spiral-bound third one this year, the corners already bent from being carried through the building and back. It looks like her name on the org chart under Rennick's box, in the same column as Brandon's, the line drawn clean as a fact. Marcus is in the room. He is across the table, not beside her, because that is how it works now. She runs her vertical, he runs his. They eat lunch at the same restaurant on Thursdays, and nobody at Wolf River Logistics Group thinks it is interesting anymore. That took about 6 weeks to stop being interesting. The office has a short attention span for things that turn out to be fine. The new hire's name is Petra. She's 24. She came from a trucking company in Clarksville that lost its operating authority and folded in March, and when Delia interviewed her, she noticed that Petra already knew what a pocket clock was and how a BOL was supposed to be signed at the dock. She hired her in under an hour. She didn't explain the pad to her right away. She waited until Petra asked. Rennick is at the head of the table. He runs a tighter meeting than he used to, or maybe Delia just doesn't lose any minutes to the gap between Tuesday and Thursday anymore. The notes go out before noon. 3 of the accounts she quietly restructured from the front desk log are now in the top 5 by margin. She doesn't track that to make a point. She just tracks it. The meeting is on the 3rd agenda item when Petra leans slightly and writes something down without being told to. Delia doesn't look. She doesn't need to. She felt it the way you feel a room shift when someone in it starts paying attention. That is the thing about a front desk. Everyone assumes it faces the people coming in. Nobody thinks about what it faces out. The window of the conference room catches the morning light off the Wolf River and throws it long and flat across the table. The phone rings once at the front desk, and Petra doesn't flinch. Because it always rings, and it will always ring, and somebody out there is on the second call about the same load and just needs one person to stay on the line long enough to hear what the problem actually is. Petra is going to be that person. Delia can already tell. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels.